The 8 most violent guests Johnny Carson ever had. They weren't actors playing tough guys or wrestlers performing scripted feuds. These were real people with documented histories of physical altercations who brought that intensity, sometimes uncomfortably, to America's favorite late-night show. Some had criminal records for assault. Others had reputations for explosive tempers that made producers nervous. A few created genuinely tense moments on air. For 3 decades, Johnny Carson welcomed over 22,000 guests to The Tonight Show. Most were polite, professional entertainers, but a handful carried reputations so volatile that staff members were briefed on protocols before they arrived. These weren't publicity stunts, these were genuine concerns about unpredictability once the cameras rolled. Drop a comment and tell us which moment you remember most from The Tonight Show's unpredictable history. Let's start with number 8. Number 8. Charles Grodin. Charles Grodin was an accomplished actor known for roles in films like The Heartbreak Kid and Midnight Run, but to Tonight Show audiences, he became infamous for something else entirely. His aggressive, confrontational interview style that often crossed the line from comedy into genuine hostility. Grodin's approach was deliberately antagonistic. In a famous 1982 appearance, he verbally challenged Carson about the show's format, refusing to follow standard interview protocol. The tension became so uncomfortable that Carson had to cut to a commercial break just to reset the conversation. What made it particularly unsettling was the ambiguity. Was Grodin performing an elaborate bit, or was he genuinely angry? This pattern repeated itself across multiple appearances throughout the 1980s. While Grodin framed his behavior as comedy, Tonight Show staff members didn't always see it that way. His confrontational approach made people genuinely uncomfortable, creating an atmosphere where no one was quite sure what would happen next. Grodin's style influenced future comedians who adopted similar antagonistic personas, but it also demonstrated the limits of aggressive humor, the point where edgy becomes genuinely hostile, where performance becomes indistinguishable from actual conflict. Number 7. Buddy Rich. Buddy Rich was arguably the greatest jazz drummer who ever lived. His technical mastery and lightning-fast hands made him a legend in the music world. But behind that extraordinary talent lurked an explosive temper that occasionally surfaced during his Tonight Show appearances. Rich was famous throughout the industry for verbally abusing his band members. Years later, recordings of his profanity-laced tirades would become infamous, revealing just how intense his anger could be. That volatility didn't disappear when he sat across from Johnny Carson. Multiple appearances featured moments where Rich would become visibly angry during interviews. In 1986, he snapped at a Tonight Show band member during a performance, his face flushing with rage over a minor mistake. Carson, ever the professional, had to carefully manage these segments, steering conversations away from topics that might trigger an outburst. The music industry knew to walk on eggshells around Rich. His temper created difficult working environments wherever he went. Band members endured his fury because working with him meant playing with the best. But the cost was constant verbal assault. Rich died in 1987 at age 69 from heart failure. His legacy remains complicated. A genius musician whose unchecked anger overshadowed his extraordinary contributions to jazz. Number 6. Jim Brown. Jim Brown is widely considered one of the greatest running backs in NFL history. He rushed for over 12,000 yards in just 9 seasons before retiring at the peak of his career to pursue acting. But Brown's transition to Hollywood couldn't erase a documented pattern of legal troubles that spanned decades. In 1965, Brown was arrested on assault charges. The case was later dismissed, but it marked the beginning of a long history of legal issues. 3 years later, in 1968, he was convicted of assault and received a sentence with time served. These weren't isolated incidents. They represented a pattern. The most serious charges came much later. In 1999, following a domestic dispute, Brown was arrested and subsequently convicted of misdemeanor vandalism. The court ordered him to attend counseling. He was nearly 70 years old, and the pattern still hadn't stopped. Brown appeared on Carson's show multiple times throughout the 1970s and 1980s. The interviews were professional but carefully managed. Carson focused on Brown's football achievements and film career, deliberately avoiding the controversial aspects of his personal life. It was a delicate dance, acknowledging the man's athletic greatness while sidestepping the documented legal troubles. Today, at 88, Brown's legacy remains complex and hotly debated. He revolutionized the running back position and broke barriers for black athletes in Hollywood. but his documented history of legal issues raises important questions about accountability and how we evaluate public figures. Athletic greatness, the Brown case demonstrates, doesn't excuse personal conduct. Number 5. Robert Blake. Robert Blake's career began as a child actor in the R-gang comedies of the 1930s. He successfully transitioned to adult roles, earning an Emmy for the detective series Beretta in the 1970s, but behind his tough guy screen persona lurked an unpredictable volatility that made those who worked with him genuinely nervous. During his Tonight Show appearances in the 1970s and 1980s, Blake was known for erratic, confrontational behavior. He would become visibly agitated if he felt questions were disrespectful or if the conversation headed in directions he didn't like. Staff members were routinely briefed on his temperament before his appearances, a precautionary measure that spoke volumes about his reputation. Blake's intensity wasn't just an act. Those who worked with him on film sets described similar unpredictability. He could be charming one moment and explosively angry the next. The volatility that made him compelling on screen as a tough detective reflected genuine instability off-camera. Then came 2001. Blake's wife, Bonnie Lee Backley, was shot and killed outside a Los Angeles restaurant. Blake became the prime suspect. The subsequent trial gripped the nation. In 2005, he was acquitted in criminal court, but a civil jury found him liable for her death and awarded substantial damages to Backley's family. Blake died in 2023 at age 89. His 6-decade career in Hollywood was ultimately overshadowed by the public trial and the questions that lingered about that night in 2001. The intense persona he brought to Carson's show had reflected real-life unpredictability that concerned everyone who encountered it. Number 4. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra possessed one of the greatest voices in American music history. His phrasing, his control, his ability to inhabit a lyric, these qualities made him a legend. But Old Blue Eyes also had a well-documented history of physical altercations that stretched across his entire career. In 1966, Sinatra was involved in an altercation at the Beverly Hills Hotel where he struck a businessman. It wasn't his first physical confrontation, and it wouldn't be his last. Throughout his career, Sinatra had multiple documented incidents with photographers whom he particularly despised. He viewed their cameras as invasions of privacy and responded with his fists. The 1970 incident at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas was particularly serious. Sinatra got into a physical confrontation with casino management over credit issues. The details were messy, and the casino's relationship with the singer was permanently damaged. These weren't just rumors or tabloid fabrications. These were documented incidents with witnesses and sometimes legal consequences. Sinatra was also known for confronting journalists who wrote stories he deemed unfavorable. He would track them down, call them out, and occasionally threaten physical violence. The music and entertainment industry learned to be careful about what they wrote regarding Sinatra, knowing his reputation for holding grudges and settling scores. When Sinatra appeared on The Tonight Show, he regularly traveled with a security team. Carson, who was friendly with Sinatra, had to navigate these interviews carefully. Certain topics were off-limits. If a conversation touched on sensitive subjects, Sinatra would become noticeably cold and withdrawn. The temperature in the room would drop. Sinatra died in 1998 at age 82. His musical legacy is unquestionable. He remains one of the most influential vocalists who ever lived, but his personal reputation included a documented capacity for physical confrontation that can't be ignored or romanticized. The voice was angelic. The temper was very much earthbound. Number 3. Charles S. Dutton. Charles S. Dutton's story is unlike any other on this list because it's fundamentally about transformation. He's the only guest included who had been convicted of taking another person's life before sitting across from Johnny Carson. But what happened after that conviction makes his story worth examining. In 1967, a street altercation in Baltimore resulted in the death of another person. Dutton was 17 years old. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 5 years in Maryland's prison system. While incarcerated, Dutton got into an altercation with correctional officers, which resulted in additional time being added to his sentence. In total, he served nearly 8 years behind bars. Most young men who enter prison at 17 and don't leave until their mid-20s emerge hardened and hopeless. Dutton's path took a dramatically different direction. While in prison, he discovered theater. An argument over a play, ironically enough, led him to actually read it. That moment changed everything. Dutton threw himself into studying drama while incarcerated. After his release, He earned a college degree and then a Master of Fine Arts from Yale Drama School. He began getting acting roles, and his talent was undeniable. His intensity on screen came from lived experience that few actors could match. By the early 1990s, Dutton had achieved significant success, starring in the TV series Rock and earning critical acclaim for his stage work. When he appeared on The Tonight Show, Carson praised his redemption story. Unlike others on this list who avoided discussing their violent pasts, Dutton openly acknowledged what he had done and how theater had saved his life. Dutton went on to become a successful director and actor, working consistently for decades. Now 73, he has also become an advocate for prison education programs, understanding from personal experience how education can transform lives. His past was violent and tragic, a life was lost, and years were spent behind bars. But his response to that past became a story of genuine rehabilitation and second chances. In a list defined by patterns of continued violence and self-destruction, Dutton stands out as someone who confronted his worst moment and rebuilt himself completely. Number 2. Sean Penn. Sean Penn is a two-time Academy Award winner, recognized for powerful performances in Mystic River and Milk. He's also one of the most talented actors of his generation. But Penn's career has been consistently shadowed by an extensive documented history of assault charges and violent incidents that spans decades. The pattern began in the mid-1980s. In 1985, Penn faced assault charges involving a background extra on a film set. The following year, 1986, he was charged with assault after a nightclub altercation with a songwriter. These weren't just accusations, they resulted in legal consequences. In 1987, Penn was sentenced to 60 days in jail for violating probation from a previous assault conviction. He served 33 days. That same year, he struck a photographer with a rock, causing injuries that required medical attention. His hatred of paparazzi was well established, but his responses crossed the line from anger into physical violence. The most serious charges came in 1988 when Penn was arrested on attempted murder charges after an incident with a photographer. Though the charges were eventually dropped, the arrest demonstrated how volatile these confrontations had become. This wasn't just shoving or verbal altercations. These were incidents serious enough to warrant major criminal charges. Penn appeared on The Tonight Show during the late 1980s. Right in the middle of this period of legal troubles, his appearances were reportedly accompanied by security measures. During interviews, Penn would become visibly tense, especially when discussions touched on his reputation or relationship with the media. The pattern didn't end in the 1980s. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, Penn continued to face assault allegations. He was ordered to attend multiple anger management programs by various courts. The incidents became part of his public identity. The brilliant actor with the volcanic temper. Today at 64, Penn has publicly discussed working on his anger issues. He continues to act and has expanded into directing and activism. But his history remains the most extensively documented pattern of assault charges of any major Hollywood actor who appeared on Carson's show. What makes Penn's story particularly notable is that his career not only survived but thrived despite this pattern. He won Oscars. He worked with the most respected directors in the industry. The violent incidents became something Hollywood chose to overlook in recognition of his talent. Whether that was the right call remains a subject of debate. Number 1. Faye Dunaway. When Faye Dunaway appeared on Johnny Carson's show in May 1973, she was Hollywood royalty, fresh off an Oscar nomination for Bonnie and Clyde, and cementing her status as one of the era's most captivating leading ladies. But behind the glamorous exterior lurked something far darker. A pattern of physical violence toward crew members that would span nearly 5 decades. The first documented incident occurred on the set of Mommy Dearest in 1981. Rutanya Alda, who played the assistant to Dunaway's Joan Crawford, described her very first day on set in chilling detail. During a scene, instead of performing a stage slap, the theatrical technique where actors create the illusion of violence without actual contact, Dunaway struck her hard across the face for real. The slap was deliberate, painful, and entirely unprofessional. It set the tone for what would become a decades-long reputation. 5 years earlier, actor James Woods experienced Dunaway's rage firsthand during the filming of The Disappearance of Amy. When Woods ad-libbed a single line during a scene, Dunaway threw something at him in fury. Woods later recalled the incident with genuine bewilderment, noting that if the notoriously difficult Bette Davis could manage to be civil and professional on set, Faye Dunaway should at minimum extend that same courtesy to her colleagues. The irony? Davis herself would later become one of Dunaway's most outspoken critics. In a legendary 1988 appearance on The Tonight Show, the same show where Dunaway had once charmed audiences, Bette Davis delivered one of the most brutal takedowns in late-night television history. When Johnny Carson asked her to name the worst person she'd ever worked with in Hollywood, Davis didn't hesitate. $1 million, Faye Dunaway. She went on to describe Dunaway as totally impossible, completely uncooperative, and thoroughly unprofessional. Carson, surprised by the frankness, noted that Davis herself had a reputation for being tough. Davis's response was swift. "Oh no, I never had a reputation of that kind of thing." Coming from Bette Davis, a woman famous for not suffering fools, this was a damning indictment. The violence continued well into Dunaway's later career. During a 1996 tour of Masterclass, Broadway wig designer Paul Huntley witnessed Dunaway slap his assistant's hand because she didn't like how hairpins were being presented to her. The assistant had done nothing wrong. Dunaway simply disagreed with the presentation method. The slap was her immediate response. But perhaps the most disturbing incident occurred in July 2019 during rehearsals for the Broadway-bound play Tea at 5. According to multiple crew members, Dunaway slapped and threw objects at people who were attempting to fit her wig. The situation became so dangerous that a scheduled performance was canceled moments before curtain. Producers described the work environment as hostile and dangerous. Shortly after, Dunaway was fired from the production entirely. A humiliating end to what was supposed to be her triumphant return to Broadway after a 40-year absence. The fallout continued. Michael Rocha, Dunaway's personal assistant on Tea at 5, filed a lawsuit alleging not only verbal abuse but a pattern of harassment. He claimed Dunaway regularly berated him, created a hostile work environment, and subjected him to discriminatory treatment. The lawsuit included recordings of her tirades. 2 weeks after reporting the abuse, Rocha was fired, allegedly because Dunaway was no longer comfortable with him. What makes Dunaway's case particularly striking is the consistency. This wasn't a single moment of lost temper or an isolated incident blown out of proportion. From 1976 through 2019, a span of 43 years, crew members, assistants, and fellow actors reported being slapped, struck with objects, or subjected to violent outbursts. The pattern never changed, the behavior never improved. Faye Dunaway may have been a brilliant actress, but her legacy is forever stained by the trail of people she physically assaulted throughout her career. So there you have it, the 8 most violent guests Johnny Carson ever had. Not manufactured TV drama, but real people with documented histories of physical altercations and legal troubles. Some, like Charles S. Dutton, found redemption and completely transformed their lives. Others continued destructive patterns for decades. A few, like Sid Vicious, faced tragic endings that seemed almost inevitable in retrospect. What connected them all was their ability to bring genuine tension to a show built on comfortable entertainment. A reminder that behind celebrity personas existed complicated, sometimes deeply troubled human beings. Which entries surprised you most? Did we miss anyone you'd include on this list? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this examination of The Tonight Show's most intense moments, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from television's golden age. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.